There, hope you're doing really, really well today. This is Ask Daniel number 30, in which we'll go over a number of questions. See kind of an annoying glare here. Let's just take this down. Okay, sorry about that. All right, so we're gonna go over a bunch of questions, and I just realized that for Jessica and Rebecca, and maybe who else was it? Misha, maybe. If we don't have time for questions today, I'll reply. Actually, I'll do another episode tomorrow. So because I happen to be off tomorrow, so we can do that tomorrow. So anyway, without further ado, let's jump in here and look at some questions. As always, before we start here, nothing is medical advice to anyone or specific advice. It's just general thoughts and comments that I hope will be helpful to anyone, including the person that wrote the email or the comment. So with that said, firstly, Leah, aka Vegan ASMR, has a question. And I want to say, actually, Leah, thanks so much for all the support and offering reassurance and sharing your experience with others on the channel. That really means a lot. Really appreciate it. So I want to say this. Let's actually start here towards the middle of the email from Leah here, and she said, because she said something that I just want to share, and then there's a question as well. So she said the following: I think the key to this is accepting as insomnia something that is completely normal and not dangerous at all. I try to think about it as normal weather changes. Sometimes the sun is shining and you sleep great. Sometimes it's raining and you sleep bad. It's just normal. There's absolutely no point, nothing dangerous about it at all. This way of thinking helps me a lot. I try to think whatever the clinical manifestation of fatal familial insomnia would look like, there would be a point where I notice that something is different. And up to this point, there's no sense in worrying about my sleep at all. I think I just want to read that paragraph because it's so important to look at, to not mystify sleeplessness and think of it as weird and bizarre and strange, which it naturally can do as you're having trouble sleeping. But as Leah says here, when you start looking at trouble sleeping as something that is not unusual, not strange, it's normal, then you sleep much better. Okay, so let's go to this question here. I try to work on that, but there will be a long journey ahead of me. As you said, the key to good sleep is not caring about it. But when you put it like that, I have to learn not to care about something that is possible, almost extremely unlikely, a deadly thing, and it's so hard. What she's talking about here, for those of you who are not familiar with it, is like there are these very rare neurodegenerative conditions that sadly have been called insomnia. They should not be that. They should not have been called that. But she says, okay, here, I have one final question for you. I'm not asking what you know, but I'm asking what you believe. Do you believe that a severe neurodegenerative disease like Creutzfeldt-Jacobs, FFI, Alzheimer's, etc., all of which often manifest as sleep disturbances in the early stages, would produce different symptoms than just waking up at night often? So do you believe you could absolutely notice a difference to your usual insomnia from the beginning on? I'm just curious about what you believe about this. Or asked the other way around, in one of your videos, you talked about your sleep lab and that you never really think about a serious illness when somebody comes to you with insomnia problems. So at what point do you think about a serious illness? How do you separate organically ill patients from healthy patients when they talk about insomnia? Okay, I get this question. And many ways of answering this one, but I want to start here. In fellowship, to become a sleep doctor, you have to do a 1-year training. There's really no focus whatsoever on like the importance of trying to figure out which person with insomnia can have an underlying severe illness. Not at all. There was not a word about that, which tells you something, right? If like insomnia or sleep disturbance, trouble sleeping or something like that was a kind of early important indicator of a serious illness, then we would screen for that. We would be looking out for people with a certain type of sleep disturbance to then be able to predict that they're going to have this other condition later on. And there's no focus whatsoever on that. As you know, Leah, the one kind of exception or thing to add to that is when people have REM behavioral disorder, which for those of you who don't know what that is when you are acting out your dreams, you're dreaming about something and then you wake up and then you're kind of fighting because that was part of your dream. That is by itself benign. Like, yes, you can bruise yourself, you can hurt yourself in sleep, but generally not more than just kind of bang yourself up a little bit. But anyway, where I was going with that was to say that if you look at people that have that, a certain percentage do go on to develop like Parkinson's disease or Alzheimer's disease. That is true, but that's, again, not insomnia. That's not insomnia. That is REM behavioral disorder. And, you don't, generally speaking, I think the way I was taught was that if you find somebody that has REM behavioral disorder, it's not like you can predict if that person's going to have Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's disease later on. So there's no point in telling someone like, well, you have this REM behavioral disorder, you have a high risk, so at least I don't even talk about that. So the question here, do you believe that severe neurodegenerative disease would produce different symptoms than just waking up at night often? Yeah, I definitely, because when I see patients, I have tons of patients that wake up often, the majority of my patients wake up often, but never, ever as a sleep doctor does the thought cross my mind that, oh, this could be a sign of this and that. And again, if a certain pattern of sleep disturbance would signal or would be a strong indicator that this person is going to go on to develop a particular condition, then we would be taught that. We would be looking out for that, but we are not. Do you believe you could absolutely notice the difference to your usual insomnia from the beginning on? I absolutely think so. It's all, and the key in my mind is this. Someone who has what we call insomnia, there's an emotional component to it. If somebody is wondering why they can't sleep, they're researching it, they're Googling it, they're doing things to kind of sleep more, they're worried about their sleep, they're having sleep anxiety, that in my mind is crystal clear. It's insomnia. It's in my mind, it's like obvious. It is the preoccupation and anxiety and worry that is driving insomnia. I don't feel any reason whatsoever to look for anything else, unless that person also is like, they snore like crazy, then maybe you should look for sleep apnea too. But apart from that, I don't feel that there's any reason to look for something else. Not at all. I think so this the last question, how do you separate organically ill patients from healthy patients when they talk about their insomnia? I think, again, it's the emotional component. I think if somebody, this has never happened to me, but somebody's asked me this before, like, when would you be worried about somebody having like fatal familial insomnia or sporadic fatal insomnia? To me, in my opinion, that would be, and this has never happened again, but it would be if a family member brought in someone and says he's stopped sleeping, and that person is kind of having some neurological issues, like they're having gait problems and balance problems, difficulty articulating, but they don't really feel that they have a sleep problem. They're just, they're just sleeping less as far as their family member reports. Then that would be, to me, that would be unusual for me. That would be I've never seen this before. I've never seen a patient who a family member is telling me like they sleep extremely little, but the patient themselves is like not really noticing that. That would be a little odd. So again, final thing I want to see, I kind of hit this home again, like to me, it's always about the emotional component. If somebody's worried about their sleep, they're anxious, they're stressed, then to me, that's insomnia, normal, regular insomnia. So I hope that helped, Leah. And, stay in touch. Let us know how things go. And with that said, let's move on here to a question from Madison. This is Madison from Talking Insomnia number. I don't remember the number now, but the most recent Talking Insomnia episode, which I posted Tuesday, 2 days ago, I believe. Yeah. So Madison says, I want to thank you for having me on your show. I want to thank you, Madison. It's really helpful when people are willing to do that. I do have another question that I forgot to ask you. My anxiety around sleeping is making me believe that if I had to go under anesthesia for any reason, my anxiety and brain power would be so strong that I wouldn't be able to be put under. I got this fear yet again from someone on one of those apps like Reddit. I plan on fixing my sleep now, so I doubt I'll run into the problem of needing to be put under anesthesia for surgery anytime soon. But just out of curiosity, from your knowledge and understanding, do you think that this sleep anxiety and insomnia issue would be able to conflict with anesthesia? The answer to this one is absolutely not. Absolutely not. And an important point here is that being anesthetized, I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, anesthetized, whatever. Being under anesthesia and sleep are two completely different things. They're not the same thing at all. Sleep is a passive process which happens when our body's sleepy and needs to sleep, and we're not preoccupied or stressed. We're kind of, it's passive. It happens when we're sleepy enough and we're not too preoccupied. Whereas anesthesia is completely different mechanics. So the answer to that one is no, it would have zero impact on anesthesia. Okay, Maddie, hang in there and stop reading those Reddit posts or go to those groups as you're saying. I think that will really be helpful. But yeah, that said, any more questions, please stay in touch. Let us know how things go, Maddie. I think you got this. You got this. So that was Maddie, and then we'll go on to kind of follow-up question from Gary here. So the last Ask Daniel episode from Monday, we talked about a question from Gary, and he was asking this. Hi, Daniel. I was wondering if you could talk about the concept of natural sleep windows. Is there such a thing as a natural sleep window, and is it genetically determined? ? And then kind of a little bit, a second email with a little bit more exploration of the thoughts behind the first one. Here it is. The reason I'm asking you about natural sleep windows is because I started doing sleep restriction Monday. My wake-up time is 7 a.m. with a sleep time at 2 a.m. My concern is that if my natural sleep window is, say, from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., then my CBTI efforts will not be fruitful, which would be a real shame since it's really, really hard to do sleep restriction. Now, this is assuming that there is such thing as a natural sleep window for each person and that it's not alterable. Thank you again. Look forward to your next video. Thank you, Gary, for your question here. And I think the key thing here is actually you identified it yourself. That is alterable. And so I want to say this, that there are some things that are genetically determined to a large degree, and that is if you're a long sleeper, short sleeper, and also your tendency towards being a night owl or an early bird. The longer you're practicing, I think the more skeptical you become. But I do believe, and this is like what research shows, and what I do believe is that you have like familial tendencies. Like oftentimes, when you talk to someone and they sleep very little, and you ask them, how about your mom, dad, brothers and sisters? They're like, yeah, that's, my mom is the same. Same thing with night owl versus early bird. A lot of people say, I'm a night owl, and then it turns out that their dad was also a night owl. So I think that tendency is familial. I think there's a familial tendency there, but the important point there is that it doesn't mean that you can't change it at all. You can be a strong natural night owl. You really like, what ideal for you would be like going to bed at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. and sleeping until 8 or 9. But then guess what? You have to be at work at 7 a.m. and you kind of make yourself wake up early. And then guess what? Your body is adaptable. It can fall into another pattern. You can move to Australia and you can do really, really well in a completely different time zone. Your body has to be able to change or modify its preferences. So I think basically the concern I'm hearing here, like, what if I'm naturally my natural ideal sleep time would be from this time to this time, and I'm kind of making myself get up at this time and going to bed at this time or something like that. I think there's no concern there at all. Your body can definitely adapt to that. And I see that I feel like most people that share with me how they're approaching this CBTI technique of spending less time in bed do a pretty radical. Like Gary here is only going to spend 5 hours in bed, and that may work really, really well. But generally speaking, my personal opinion is that if that's hard, if that seems like spending 5 hours in bed is really very little, I think it's often better to choose maybe a bigger sleep window. That's like 6 hours, 6.5 even, as long as you feel like that's doable long term, because it's challenging. And if you have a very narrow sleep window, that sometimes that can backfire in a way that if you only give yourself 5 hours to sleep, then the pressure to sleep during those 5 hours can sometimes sabotage that effort. But this said, the most important thing is always to pick one thing and then stick with it at least for, I want to say, 2 weeks, before you think of changing it. So some more thoughts there, Gary. And you too, Gary, like stay in touch. Let us know how things go. Hope this works for you now. If not, it will work, when you do like an adjustment, something like that. I'll, as you see, I'm kind of tripping myself up here. I was going to say, I hope things go well, but it's not a matter of hope in reality. It's not a matter of hope in reality. It's just a matter of like, putting the work, not giving up, and keep going. And it works for everyone. We're moving on pretty fast there. Maybe we will get to all the questions. So with that said, with the question from Gary answered, we will move to our comment section. And there were a couple of questions here from Kimberly. Let's go back to the first one here. And this is a comment on Ask Diane number 2029 from Kimberly. Hello, I have severe insomnia. Okay, so I have seen your videos on fatal insomnia and sporadic fatal insomnia. I keep thinking I have that, but I'm able to type. I even work a part-time accounting job. It is sometimes hard working because my brain is so foggy. So back in April of 2019, that's pretty much a year ago, I woke up one day and felt different. I even told my mother I felt weird. From then on, I couldn't sleep. Fast forward, I was taking a small dose of a sleep aid and would fall asleep. I do have severe apnea, but can't use the machine. I dream from the time I fall asleep till when the drugs quit working. I'm never sleepy. I never wake rested of anything. I feel more heavy and worse the next day. My brain just cannot shut off. Last night I took 12 different pills, finally drifting off at midnight and waking at 5. I used to be a wonderful sleeper. I would be the first to sleep. My body's extremely exhausted to where when I take the meds to sleep, I feel like I'm dying. I have thought I developed sporadic fatal insomnia because I was on Paxil for 20 years. I'd always wondered if SSRI long-term use would cause prions to form in the brain. I used to take Benadryl, half a pill, and it would put me in a coma. Now I can take 10, and they make me heavy but not sleepy. I so want to sleep well again. I lay down at night but cannot fall asleep anymore. I've tried all kinds of stuff, Remrise, some LM gimmick, Trazodone, Benadryl, Tylenol, PM, melatonin, nothing helps. I have honestly thought I'm near death. I'm so tired. My apnea has played a part as well. Can you lose too much sleep to where you can't function? My brain also is awake while I sleep. All I do is dream. I'm not so tired. I'm so scared I'm going to die from no sleep. I want to say, firstly, Kimberly, thanks for commenting here. And, this is one of those comments or emails where you can really tell what a huge impact trouble sleeping has had and is having. Now, I want to really highlight this one. This sentence here towards the end. I so want to sleep well again. I so want to sleep well again. I think that sentence is like the key to everything. Meaning, if you take someone who sleeps like amazingly well, never have any trouble sleeping, head hits the pillow, they're out, etc., and you ask them what they do to sleep, they will tell you nothing. I don't really do anything. They will be kind of like just the question itself will seem kind of strange to them. Like, why would you need to do anything to sleep, right? And if you ask that person how much they want to sleep, how much they desire sleep, that would also seem odd to them. It would be like, I don't know, I have no particular desire, something like that. So, and this just highlights how sleep is a passive process. It happens when we're not trying to sleep, we're not wanting to sleep, we're not doing anything to sleep. Now, if you have trouble sleeping, of course, particularly over time, you have more and more trouble sleeping, and that sleep seems so elusive that you try things. You try to take medications, they don't work. You become more upset and anxious. You want to sleep even more. You try more things, and that's kind of the spiral of chronic insomnia. And so the reason I felt that sentence was so important is because I so want to sleep well again. That the desire to sleep well again is what fuels insomnia, And it can seem almost like cruel for me to be saying this, but I say it because it's so important. And the only way to sleep well is to get to a point where you don't feel that sleep is that important, where you're not desiring as much, you're not trying so many things to sleep well. I was on a podcast yesterday, and the host asked me. And by the way, I'll share when it's uploaded, that episode. But the host asked me if you would ask someone that has trouble sleeping to start kind of examining their own thoughts, and if you would ask them a question to guide them towards like understanding why they have trouble sleeping, what would that be? And I never got that question before. So I answered it like this, that I would ask that person to think about a time when they slept well, whether that's a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and ask, and I would ask that person to ask themselves, what were they doing to make themselves sleep back then, and compare that to what they're doing now. And most people would really find that they're doing much more things to try to produce sleep now than they were doing, when they were sleeping well. And then I continued answering, saying that person would probably, though, come back to me saying like, well, I didn't need to do anything back then because I was sleeping good. So I didn't need to do anything to sleep then. But now I sleep terribly, so I need to do things. And then I would say, that's when you have to explore that. You really have to explore that and ask yourself, could it be that it's all the things I'm trying to do to make myself sleep that is actually producing my insomnia, And that was my answer yesterday on that podcast episode. And I think that applies so well here. Like, we read from Kimberly that she tried 12 different pills in one single night. That is a very, 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 very strong sleep effort, like putting so much effort into trying to sleep. And that makes it impossible. The more you want to sleep, the more you're trying to sleep, the less of it you get. And if you're desperate, if you're like, just want a little sleep, I wish I could get a little sleep, that makes it completely impossible for good sleep to happen. Now, one more thing before we leave this comment is that feeling of like I never truly sleep, I'm kind of just dreaming all the time, is a very, very common one. And to me, it signals that someone has this very superficial sleep, kind of drifting in and out of sleep. So it feels like the whole thing was just like one continuous dream or semi-wakeful state, And so Kimberly, I think, had some other questions here. And this is another question on the same video, actually. I feel so hopeless, like I will never sleep good like I used to. I also think with the apnea, I've suffered from hypoxia. It's almost as if my entire brain created new neurons or synapses because the old ones are damaged, and the brain damage causes my brain to be awake and never quiet. So the sleep apnea can often cause trouble sleeping, and that is very, very true. Although again, like we talked about before, the emotional component tells you a lot. Most people with sleep apnea, may wake up all the time and takes long to fall asleep, but they're not too worried about it. They don't have that strong emotional component to it. So when people have that strong emotional thing going on, to me, that signals that it is insomnia. And another super common thing when I talk to people that have trouble sleeping is that the belief that something is wrong with the brain, something they did 20 years ago, something that has been happening, medication, something has damaged their body to a point where it cannot really produce sleep again. That is a myth. Your sleep system cannot be damaged or hurt in any way. It's still working. It is our thoughts, our beliefs, our habits that feed it, including that feed the insomnia, and including like thinking about, pondering, asking yourself why you can't sleep, thinking you have a brain damage, and that produces a lot of insomnia, so that's just a little comment on that one. And and the final thing here, Kimberly, is sometimes, for this channel is here for the purpose of helping people sleep better in a kind of like many other things on YouTube. It's like DIY thing, I share everything I know, and I hope people can apply it, without spending any money or any, time traveling to a therapist or anything like that. Just do it yourself. That's the goal of this channel. But for many people, it is hard. It's hard to get past insomnia on your own. And I was reading your comments. I thought, that there's you get this strong sense of fear, anxiety, frustration that maybe considering working with somebody may be good, And when I say that, I think it is important to find somebody that does cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or CBTI, and somebody who is interested and knowledgeable in the field. And I can say that my friend and a colleague, Martin Reed, REED, he has a program which I think is very good. Stephanie Romashevsky, she was a guest on my podcast a couple of weeks ago. She seemed very, very knowledgeable too, and she also has a program. So some things to consider. All right. So that said, we can actually move ahead here to a question. Let's see how we're doing on time. 26 minutes. Yeah, we still have time here. Misha, 6 hours ago, this is a comment on Insomnia Insight number 204. And by the way, that episode was about Bruce, who had felt that just having some sleeping pills, but he virtually never used them, but just having them gave him so much reassurance that he slept well. It was very interesting to me, how sleeping pills sleeping pills helped him because he never took them. But anyway, that said, here's the question from Misha. Hi, Daniel. I take pills regularly. I was prescribed pills at age 16, and ever since, for 7 to 8 years, I've been taking them almost every day. I was prescribed Rivotril and then mirtazapine. It's tough for me to leave it now. How do I go about quitting pills? I've had sleep anxiety for a while. All right, so this, pretty common question, and there are always, different varieties of it. But the question here is, how do I get off sleeping pills? I think the first and foremost, the most important thing is to understand that medications cannot make you sleep. They cannot. It's physiologically, biologically impossible to chemically induce sleep. If that was not the case, then we wouldn't have insomnia, right? There would be kind of this pill that you just took and it made you sleep. And if you slept too little, you double the dose and you would sleep good, right? That's not the case. That's not the case. And many people will feel like and argue that, well, this thing worked in the beginning, but it's not working now. This works for me, but this doesn't. In reality, what's happening is that it's really driven by belief. It's placebo effect. I think, yes, the first time somebody takes a medication, that there might be the kind of the chemical thing, the sedation may reduce anxiety and then allow your body to sleep. Again, it's not making you sleep, but the medication can kind of, sedate you to a point where your natural sleep drive can kick in. But that chemical thing, I believe, will last maybe for a day or 2 days. And it's really what sleeping pills really do is that they boost your confidence. You have something you take and you believe that it's going to help you sleep, and then that reduces kind of anxiety that's keeping you from sleeping, and then your natural sleep drive kicks in. Now, the important point here is that if someone's taken sleeping medications for 10 years or 5 years or 2 months or a week or whatever it is, and they slept better, then it wasn't the medications. The medications didn't do that. It was always your own body that produced the sleep. Every minute, every second, every hour of sleep was produced by your own body. And I say that because that will help you transfer sleep confidence. If someone's taking medication for 5 years and they realize that it was actually always my own body that produced that sleep, you're starting the process of transferring confidence from the outside, from the pill, to yourself where it belongs. So that is super important. And that's just a kind of a thought work, thinking about that and letting that knowledge work in your favor. Now, number two, when it comes to coming off medications, the most important thing, in my opinion, is it cannot be a trial. It cannot be a trial. It cannot be like, I'm going to try to come off this medication, because when people do that, it, in my experience, invariably doesn't work, because that person will say, I'm going to try to take half now. And that could not be much of a problem. But then they say, okay, now I'm going to try not to take it at all. Well, guess what? When you go to bed, knowing that you are trying not to take your medication, then that produces a lot of anxiety. You're thinking like, what if I don't fall asleep? What if I have to go back on the medication? Then I can never come off it. What if I take half? Should I take half? Should I take it every other day? What if this? What if that? That leads to so much insomnia that I feel people who are trying to come off medication always go back on it, because eventually they're just like, oh, it's been 2 weeks and I've slept a total of like 8 hours and I just can't stand anymore. I have to go back on it. And that's so damaging, because then that seems like proof that you really can't come off the medication. Like you tried for 2 weeks, but you had to go back on it because you didn't get a wink, right? So where I'm going here is to say that when someone wants to come off their medication, I believe it has to be not a trial, but a decision. It has to be a decision. I'm going to take half of the dosage starting next week, and I'm going to do that for 1 week, and then I'm going to stop taking it, and then I'm never going to take it again. And that you decide that. And once you've decided that, then the anxiety is not there anymore. If you don't give yourself the option of going back, if you decided that is it, then that anxiety of like, should I take it? Should I go back on it? Is no longer there. That is the way to go, in my opinion. So I think that's it for now. So Misha, stay in touch. Follow questions, please post those, and I'll be more than happy to answer those, of course. And then we have 2 more questions. One is from Rebecca and one is from Jessica. In fact, I think the one from Jessica came in first. So let's do them in order. Jessica wrote this email only 3 hours ago. Hi, Daniel. Your podcast, book, and YouTube info has been so relieving to me. I've been listening, watching Martin read. Cannot describe the level of anxiety I had before finding this info compared to now, which is a huge step, in my opinion. I told you, that is a huge step, and I thank you for the encouragement. And when it comes to insomnia, I very often observe this, like there are like these 3 steps. The first step is like feeling less anxious, not necessarily sleeping any better, but feeling less anxious. And then what follows then after a while is like sleeping better, but not necessarily feeling more refreshed. A lot of people are like, well, I'm actually sleeping better now, but I'm still tired. And that's kind of the final step, is like, you're completely recovered, you're sleeping well, and you feel less tired. So anyway, less anxiety is a big step, absolutely. My story is very similar to so many that I've listened to, and I didn't even know there was a big one that happens for many people, but having the big one is what really started my chronic insomnia anxiety. And quick interjection here. I've talked about the big one a couple of times, and I kind of learned that actually from Nick Wignall, who has been on my channel a couple of times, psychologist. Like, he worded it really well. But anyway, the big one is when you have that initial stretch of like complete sleeplessness, or like very little sleep for typically like a couple of days, and that's the one that starts everything. And after that, you have this fear of like, what if that happens again? What if the big one comes back? So that's what Jessica is referring to here. I didn't know much about medication or insomnia anxiety at the time. I was prescribed Zolpidem. I feel in many ways the Zolpidem became its own source of anxiety for me, because I'd never taken any kind of prescribed medication, and I have felt so broken that I needed something to fall asleep. Over the past 1.5 years, I've used Zolpidem as needed, which only made anxiety about it worse for me, I think. I've also been in therapy, and I've learned so much about myself during the past 2 years. I'm so incredibly grateful, but the sleep thing just persists, I feel like. After reading about CBTI, I've realized that I actually do sleep well and fall asleep fast many times. However, I think my body responds to stress by being overactive at night, and I have been so afraid of having the big one happen again that it's hard to move past it. Honestly, feels like a trauma response in many ways. So true. I often say that, insomnia can be like PTSD, very much so. Like you have this trauma, what feels like, traumatic experience, and you're afraid of it happening again. Totally. Lately, I've been falling asleep too early, like between 8:30 and 9:30 when I'm putting my kids to bed, or on the couch watching TV and waking up around midnight, and then being so afraid I won't go back to sleep or feel super alert because I have to actually go get in my bed. So I've been taking the zolpidem when I wake at midnight or so, but I really, really don't want to take the medication. I've implemented waking up the same time every day, 6:15 a.m., and I've really enjoyed that. However, I'm super nervous about implementing the bedtime restriction because I feel like if I fall asleep without even meaning to, then I can have sleep confidence, like I'm on the couch with my kids. I don't know if this makes sense. I just feel like taking zolpidem and this are my two hurdles right now. Does this make sense? This makes 100% sense, 1,000% sense. And to kind of just clarify this for anyone out there that is wondering what Jessica's talking about, or what I mean when I say it makes sense. The zolpidem, we're going to talk about that in a second. I'm just going to actually let me get back to that one, but let's talk about the second thing here, the part about sleep confidence here. So Jessica's saying like she feels like when she falls asleep without intending to fall asleep, when she's kind of just on the couch with her kids, then I can have sleep confidence. Like then at that point in time, she's pretty confident that she will sleep, and then it happens pretty easily, right? And there's no surprises there, but I want to say this, that having, sleep confidence is really about not questioning whether, you're going to fall asleep or not being worried about not falling asleep, being confident that there's nothing wrong with you, and which is kind of different, from what you're describing here in terms of falling asleep early on, meaning what you're describing is actually, it's very common for people that have trouble sleeping to fall asleep easily when they don't intend to. When you're watching TV at 8 p.m. or when you're driving, you feel really sleepy or things like that. Very common among people with insomnia. And to me, that's actually not a sign of sleep confidence, because sleep confidence is more about like, when you go to bed, when it is the time to sleep, then you're not worried about your sleep and you sleep well. Then you have good sleep confidence, versus falling asleep kind of unintentionally where you don't intend to. That's not necessarily, or it's not, in my opinion, a sign of sleep confidence. And here's the thing, like what really drives insomnia is the fear of losing sleep, or the desire to get more sleep, which is like, two sides of the same coin, right? Now, when you have trouble sleeping, oftentimes you are so afraid of losing sleep that you take it when you can get it. Like, if you can get it in the morning, then you take it there. If you can get a nap, you take it there. If you fall asleep early, you take it there. It kind of feels good that time. Like it feels like I got 2 hours. That's good. I've got 3 hours, etc. But the problem is that what feels good in the short run, and what objectively probably does make you feel better in the short run, can sabotage your process of getting good sleep long term, because you're kind of avoiding sleeplessness, you're avoiding insomnia, which then teaches your brain that it's really bad and you should avoid it. So when you allow yourself to sleep with your kids, then because you're like, I'm getting some sleep, you're teaching your brain that not getting sleep is very dangerous. It's something you should avoid, etc. And then you're kind of perpetuating the insomnia, and again, what you describe here is like you're really afraid of doing this bedtime restriction because you think that maybe the big ones can come back, or you're afraid. So, and the thing with that is like, again, like it is the problem there is the fear of losing sleep. As long as you have a fear of losing sleep, you will continue losing sleep. Your brain will continue to try to keep you safe and keep you from losing sleep, which you continue to train it to do. So I think that the big positive here is that you have a lot of insight. All the things I'm saying, I think you already know that. So that's hugely helpful for you. And then with the zolpidem, it's kind of the same thing again. Like, firstly, you're absolutely right. Like, I think sleep medications are a huge problem, and the reason is that, let's say somebody had trouble sleeping for a while, and they finally tell their doctor, and the doctor says, well, here you go, here's a prescription for zolpidem. What happens in that moment is very damaging, because in that moment the doctor is implying that there's something wrong with you, which there isn't. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just like habits and thought processes that have caused you to have trouble sleeping. But when somebody hands you a prescription, it feels like that person telling you there's something wrong with you. Number two, if you take a medication and you end up sleeping more, that's even worse, because then that seems like confirmation. Yeah, there truly is something wrong with me. I really need this thing, this external thing, this chemical to sleep. And your sleep confidence now has been really, really damaged twice, right? And then, a lot of times these medications are, people prescribe them and say, like, but don't use them too much, just here and there when you really need them, which is actually the worst way of prescribing them, because then you go through like cycles when you're like, or you go through nights when you're like, I haven't slept good for a couple of nights, and now I really need my sleep, so I'm going to take this medication, which then creates this belief that when I really need to sleep, then I have to take this medication. Meaning, when it's important, I definitely can't sleep on my own. I definitely need this external thing, which again is really, really eroding your sleep confidence. So with medications, it's the best thing to do, in my opinion, is, and I don't say this applies to you, Jessica, but just my general thought is that either take them every same time every single night, or don't take them at all. If you take them every time the same time every single night, the good thing with that is that they become a non-factor. If you sleep good or bad, it has nothing to do with the medication. The medication's out, they're not in the calculation anymore. It's so it's really important to know that medication cannot produce sleep, and either take it every night or not at all. Taking them as needed, in my opinion, is really, really damages your sleep confidence. So with all that said, I think, yes, Jessica says it, I just feel like taking zolpidem and this, not kind of being nervous about bedtime restriction, are my two biggest hurdles. I think you're 100% right. But the good thing again is, like, you already knew that, and you know what you should do. You know what the next step is, and just think of it long term. I think is really good. Like, that if you take these steps that you yourself identify that are good for you, if you think about the long term, you do them, I believe that it's inevitable that you will get good sleep if you find the courage to do it. And by the way, I'll say the same thing here again. Like, if you feel like working with Martin Reed, who has a program, will help you, then consider that. Sometimes we need a little accountability, support, etc. But yeah, Jessica, thanks so much for this very nice question, and stay in touch. Any follow-up questions, let me know. And I totally think you got this, Jessica. Absolutely. All right. So that said, here is Rebecca. This is the last question here. Came in just an hour ago. I just found your YouTube channel. I've been struggling with insomnia for 2 months now, and never before. From what I've seen so far, it looks like it's paradoxical. However, when I used to sleep really well, my body would become warm and heavy and very comfortable as I slept. And I haven't felt that type of sensation and rest in such a long time. It's like my body forgot how to sleep. Now it feels like I'm half awake all the time, and I'm never comfortable and never feel rested. Have you heard of that type of feeling change in one's body before? Absolutely. I want to say this, the particular way you describe it, like my body would become warm and heavy and comfortable, maybe not in those words, but, generalizing it more here, somebody saying, when I slept well, I would feel kind of like I truly fell asleep. I had restful sleep. A lot of people say I got REM sleep, although you don't know that, but people describe like I really felt like that was sleep, but now I don't get that at all. It's like my body has forgotten how to sleep. I'm half awake all the time. All this is extremely common, extremely common. I definitely heard this before. So I just want to say that I think that is very helpful to hear, that it's very, very important. It's super important to think of your insomnia as common, normal, the same insomnia as everybody else has. If you think of your insomnia as kind of strange, unusual, bizarre, it takes you into the direction of thinking something strange is wrong with me. I got to figure out what it is. And, what works for other people is not going to work for me. I need this particular drug or extract, valerian root. I need something particular. Nothing else is going to work for me because my insomnia is different from others, versus if you think, actually, you know what? I think I have the same thing that everybody else has, and spending less time in bed and understanding that it is my kind of thought process and my habits that is feeding it. And if I just change those things, I can sleep well. That is the path. So again, believing that one's own insomnia is typical and not strange is super, super helpful. So yeah, I want to say I've heard everything you described in some shape or form many times before. Paradoxical insomnia, by the way, for anyone out there, is when you sleep much less than when you sleep much or significantly more than you believe you sleep. Like you feel you slept maybe 1 hour, but you actually slept 4 or something like that. That's paradoxical insomnia. And people with paradoxical insomnia often have this like in and out of sleep, very superficial sleep, remember all their dreams. It's kind of this bizarre feeling, but guess what? It's just a variation of insomnia. It's nothing. Paradoxical insomnia is just, I feel like it's helpful to talk about it because that makes people can identify like, oh yeah, I'm the same as this other person. But in reality, everybody with insomnia has paradoxical insomnia to one degree. Is just part of the spectrum of what we call insomnia. So just to kind of demystify the paradoxical thing there. So yeah, Rebecca, hope this helps. Stay in touch. Please let me know if you have any follow-up questions. And oh, hey, Kimberly is here live. Thank you so much. I did sleep some last night without taking a bunch of meds and don't remember any dreams. That's amazing. That's awesome. I'm super happy to hear that, Kimberly. And I want to say that the good thing with this is that proves that you can sleep some, I'm sure you can sleep much more than you did last night, but you can sleep without taking medications. Perfect. You can sleep without remembering any dreams. Perfect. That you can use that to build your sleep confidence, right? But then, and this is a little bit of a little bit slightly cautious thing I want to say here is I learned this just a couple of weeks ago from Stephanie Romashevsky, who guested on my podcast again a couple of weeks ago. And she said, when people sleep great or sleep better, the first, right after seeing you, then that's kind of a placebo effect. Nothing wrong with that. It's great whenever someone sleeps better. I think that you should make a big deal and let it build the confidence, but you may not have done much work yet, Kimberly. You may not have started kind of questioning your thoughts and changing your habits. So the real kind of long-term benefit you get really when you do that, when you start like really internalizing that there's nothing wrong with you, really internalizing that my insomnia is driven by my thoughts and habits, etc. Spending less time in bed, shifting attention away from sleep, etc. All the things I talk about. That's when you get the real long-term benefits. So yeah. That said, we will end here. Kimberly, super happy with this, and stay in touch. And everybody else too. Thanks for all the questions, and I'll be back again on Monday. Until then, take care.